The theme I was wanting to unpack with you in this episode is really, how do you make money as a DP?
I think the closest industry to what we do is construction. I mean, literally, it's like, okay, you're going to hire a general contractor to build a house. You know, how many times has a client said to you, Daniel, hey, how much is it going to cost? Right? It's like, well, okay, what type of house do you want? You want a 3-bedroom? You want 2 bath? You want a pool out back? Like, you know, or buying a car. It's like, so I'm like, I look at myself as kind of like a general contractor. And just like I would hire a DP or an audio tech or a gaffer or grip, I mean, those are your plumbers, your electrician, tile, carpenter, your flooring guy, you know, and I think where I've, you know, not to get ahead of myself, is where I've been able to make money is I'm like a general contractor that can also do the plumbing and the electrical. Like I can shoot and edit and produce. And I think that's where, you know, I've been able to make money as a filmmaker and build other businesses.
Jason is an Emmy award-winning DP, two-time. He runs his own production company, Jason Ryan Creative, literally all over the world. I think this man is on planes. I thought I'd never meet anyone on planes more than me, but Jason has...
He actually, I think I might change the name of my production company to LMP. Last Minute Productions. It's basically my entire life is, you know, getting a call from ESPN and saying, hey, we need you in this country tomorrow, and off we go.
Yeah, off we go. Well, before we get into ESPN, let's go back to the beginning.
The first frame.
I know football is a huge part of your story. Now, to get into production, did it start with football, or was it even before?
You know, it's funny. Football is definitely my segue into production. But yeah, I always tell people in my first life, I was a football player. And
professional football player, mind you.
Grew up in Puyallup, Washington, you know, 45 minutes south of Seattle. My grandfather was a football coach at Pacific Lutheran University, Division III level. He's the 9th winningest coach of all time in college football. NCAA Hall of Fame. And I grew up as a ball boy from like knee high. And it was never Huskies or Cougars. It was always PLU Lutz. And so I always knew that football was in my blood. It's what I wanted to do. But I wanted to make movies. As a kid, when I got to high school, to graduate the state of Washington, you have to do a senior project. And so for mine, I actually went down to Hollywood and sat with an editor. And he was on Avid and he was cutting I think Christian television shows at the time, but I was like, hey, how do you do this? Like, what do you do?
Real quick, how did even that opportunity come about? Because I even think people now with the tools available, like even at high school, you were in high school. Like, was that just a connection?
Yeah, it's all, I mean, every part of this business is relationships, and some relationships are getting a foot in the door. Some relationships are, how do I get my next project? Some relationships are about learning, you know, how do I find a mentor? How do I learn how to shoot, how to edit, how to direct? And it was a friend at our church knew a guy that was in LA, didn't know him. I literally cold called him as a high school junior. And I said, hey, next year would love to take my spring break and come to LA and see what you do. And he said yes. And I was a fly on the wall for a week. And watching editing is really exciting for about 30 minutes. I didn't realize that like watching editing for a week, by the end I was like, oh my God, they'd kill me. This is horrible. But yeah, so that's kind of where I got my start in that background. When it came time to pick a college, I was football first. Like, it was funny, when I got to Arizona, my coach said, just remember, football, or he goes, school first, football second. School first, football second. Basically, it's like, you're here to play football. And so I chose Arizona. But it was ironic, during my high school trip, and this like kind of changed a little bit of the course of my life. The guy that I sat with all week, he goes, listen, you can learn the art of filmmaking. You can learn how to edit. You can learn lighting techniques and story. He goes, there's a lot of starving artists out there that don't know the business. He goes, I would actually get a degree in business, not production. You can learn production on set or on YouTube or through mentors. And I took that to heart. So when I actually picked a college, Arizona had a great entrepreneurial program, had a great business school. So I actually studied business at school and played football and knew that I would learn the production later.
Yeah, that's great. Because honestly, the theme I was wanting to unpack with you in this episode is really, how do you make money as a DP? So really, it started there at the beginning.
It did. And it started with treating film like a business, like a product, like a service. And how does that work? And how do you pitch a project? How do you charge for yourself, your crew, your time? I always joke with people right now that like, I think the closest industry to what we do is construction. I mean, literally, it's like, okay, you're going to hire a general contractor to build a house. You know, how many times has a client said to you, Daniel, hey, how much is it going to cost? Right? It's like, well, okay, what type of house do you want? You want a 3-bedroom? You want 2-bath? You want a pool out back? Like, you know, or buying a car. It's like, so I'm like, I look at myself as kind of like a general contractor. And just like I would hire a DP or an audio tech or a gaffer or grip, I mean, those are your plumbers, your electrician,
Tile,
carpenter, your flooring guy, you know, and I think where I've, you know, not to get ahead of myself is where I've been able to make money is I'm like a general contractor that can also do the plumbing and the electrical. Like I can shoot and edit and produce. And I think that's where, you know, I've been able to make money as a filmmaker and build other businesses is like, you know, when you're hiring my production company, I'm not outsourcing the editing. I'm doing the editing. You know, I'm usually, you know, I can DP and direct. And that doesn't mean I'm the only guy on set, but I think it's allowed me to sort of bill for more than one aspect, whereas some people are so locked into like, I just shoot. That's great, but are you being hired 365 days a year to shoot? Probably.
Which you are.
Oh, no. I don't know about that.
Close, but yes.
Anyway, so just to kind of get back on my story. So, you know, when I went to school, I kind of had this like, let me understand business and let me understand, you know, economics and accounting and all these other like technical skills. But ironically, my junior year at Arizona, ESPN decided to shoot a documentary on our team. And it was called The Season. It was literally one of the very, very first follow docs there ever was. They had done like maybe the University of Florida. They'd maybe done Notre Dame, but like Arizona football, they had a crew of 8 move out from LA and they did a 2-hour primetime special on our team. And I'm like, this is my internship. Like, this is it. Right. Like, so I'm going up to the director and I'm like, what are you shooting on? How are you editing? Hey, can I come over to you guys' house tonight and see how you put the show together? So that's like really like where I started to like learn. And I'm like, okay, they were shooting on mini DV. They shot some B-roll on actual film. And I like watched how they did that. And then actually when our season ended, I went to LA for 3 weeks while they cut the show. And I still remember being in their studio in like West Hollywood, and they had like 1 million Post-it notes. And they had like every scene that they had shot, like Loss at Washington, Jason gives a tour of his house. Like I was also like making sure that I was treated well on the show. Like, hey, I got to make sure that they like get the
good stuff. Right.
Treat me right.
Right.
There is a lesson there. Be nice to the crew.
Right.
They have all the honesty. Yeah. And anyways, long story short, I saw how they structured a documentary and how they, you know, they're not going to follow 80 characters on your team. They're going to pick 4 or 5 main characters. You're going to have the coach. You're going to have the troublemaker. You're going to have the quarterback. You're going to have the star player, like all these guys. And so to me, that was my film school. And I went to town on it. And when I left there, I'm like, okay, maybe I don't want to make actual Hollywood movies. Maybe I want to pair sports and film together in this like documentary ESPN style world.
Yeah. And that's been your bread and butter and calling card. Now, I think based on today with NIL, all the media tools available, like what advice do you have? Because I think back then you were kind of like ahead of the curve with athletes being involved in media, but now it's so accessible. Like what advice do you have? Because the truth is, how many people are going to actually make it professionally? It's like very slim. But if you can pick up some experience, interest along the way, it's kind of a win-win.
Oh, absolutely, man. I mean, I think it's so funny because like all of these professions, there's no halfway to do it. There's no halfway to be a quarterback. There's no halfway to be in production. You got to be all in. And give a shout out to my boy Ed Sheeran. I saw him on big Ed Sheeran fan.
Wait, how many times have you seen Ed Sheeran? It's insane.
7. I don't know. It's my thing. an obscure show. Anyways, he was on Howard Stern the other day, and Howard Stern was asking Ed Sheeran, how did you learn to play guitar? And there's videos of Ed Sheeran at like age 12, 13, horrible. And he laughs at him, right? But he goes, I had no plan B. Like, this was my plan. I was going to make it. It's like the literal, story of the Vikings where they supposedly would burn their ships when they went to conquer a country because there's no retreat. Like, you have to conquer, or that's it. And I think, I was in a world where it was all in on football. And then I think a lot of people have problems pivoting because then they're like, okay, all I've done is football. How am I going to go do media? But I think for me, it was like, okay, how do I went all in on this. Now, how do I go all in on the next thing and on the next thing and on the next thing? And yeah, to your point, getting exposure to all these things. I think a lot of kids, especially young kids coming up, or maybe they want to, dabble in this at all. Like, my advice to them is like, get experience, figure out what you want to do. You got to try things like until do I want to be a DP? Do I want to be an editor? Do I want to be an audio guy? Like, yeah, you want to do film. Like, what does that mean? Right. And so I think the more exposure to it, the better. And when I was exposed to it as an athlete, and, I saw what the local news was doing. I saw what, these production companies were doing. I'm like, that's what I want to do. I want to make sports docs and feature stories.
And you found that really early. This episode of Frame by Frame is brought to you by Mogg Media. Whether you're a brand or creator or business looking to tell your story through powerful visuals, Mogg Media is here to bring your vision to life. Based in Seattle, but serving clients all over, we specialize in high-quality video production that connects and converts. From commercials, branded content, to social media videos, and even short films, we handle every step frame by frame. If you'd like to work with us, please shoot me a note, hello@danielmogg.com. I'd love to get in touch with you, hop on a discovery call, and see how we can work together in 2025. So much fun, an incredible career at Arizona, and go play professionally in Buffalo for a little bit, right? Yep. How was that experience? Really, I mean, that's a big dream too.
So finished at Arizona and signed with the Buffalo Bills. So I spent, part of a season with the Bills. I actually, made the team on their practice roster, and Drew Bledsoe was the starting quarterback then. And this was like a year after Bledsoe had left the Patriots. Right. So actually, like my first game in my NFL career, we played the Patriots, and we destroyed the Patriots that game. And so, I tell people, I played a game in the NFL, beat Tom Brady. Like, how hard is that? That's brilliant. Anyways, I tell people I had my cup of coffee in the NFL, and that was great.
Post Buffalo Bills, I know you go to the Canadian Football League, which is like a huge part of your story and getting into production. So tell me about that a little.
Yeah, it was crazy. So I got released by the Buffalo Bills and signed in the Canadian League, and at the time I knew a lot about it, but it was still this new adventure. And so I went up to play in Canada. I was the backup quarterback in Edmonton. But the other cool thing is you had 6 or 7 months of the year off where you could literally start to develop your interests outside of football. So I actually was dating a girl who would go on to be my wife, Christy, and we actually started our own production company. So we started doing some small projects for, local Canadian businesses and things like that.
And let me pause you there. Yeah. How, was that kind of like, yes, like they give you a project, yes, we'll figure it out, or like how did you even figure out like how to pull off a commercial or do a production?
Yeah, and I'd say if there's like one lesson that I would have for like young people in this industry or guys just getting started is like always say yes and figure it out. Now it's worked out almost every time for me that I've been able to pull it off, but they knew that myself and Christy had some experience, but at the time I started off just basically producing. So like I would hire a DP, I would hire a gaffer, I would hire an editor. And I would just work with the client and just be like, oh, hey, what do you guys want? You want a cool video that promotes education and sports? I got you. I'll get some professional athletes. We'll do some cool shots. I'll hire good people. Off we go. And it was actually my second year in the CFL that I got my big break. And it was really my own hustle where I said, you know what? Arizona followed my football team for a year. I could do that. And so I literally went and pitched, it's called TSN, which is Canadian ESPN. Right. It stands for The Sports Network. Nice acronym. And anyway, so I went and I pitched them this documentary and they said, we love it. And I wanted to do a documentary on my football team while I was playing. and it was going to be called Inner Circle, and it was the story of the 3 quarterbacks on our team, because we had basically the 2 previous MVPs from past years on our team, and then myself, and we were all really good friends and competitors. So I wanted to like do a film that kind of looked at this relationship of a quarterback room and say, you know, how can you be fighting for the same job and still be friends? And so I pitched the network, and they're like, we love the idea. We don't pay money for documentaries. And I was like, oh, okay. And I said, all right, well, is there anything else we can do? And they go, we will give you the airtime and allow you to sell a title sponsor and sell the commercials to pay for the doc. I was like, all right, I'm in.
It's your business degree coming to work.
Business degree, right? So I said, all right, how can I work? So I went out, I found a title sponsor for the show. I was like knocking on doors, cold calling businesses. I sold 10 commercials, and I had like a meager sum. It was like less than $20,000 to do a whole film.
For a full season. That's not
Yeah,
that much.
and so I said, all right, I can't follow the whole team for a season. And we play this thing called the Labor Day Classic, where we play our rival team twice in 5 days. We play them Labor Day Monday, and then we play them again on Friday. And it's like this thing between Edmonton and Calgary. And so I said, okay, I can't shoot a season, but I can shoot this many days. And I'm also playing, so like I can't shoot, and I don't even know how to shoot at the time.
Right.
And so there was a young filmmaker named David Puff, and we're still friends. I still work with him when I go to Canada. I hired him for super cheap, and he followed our team. And then I went to our coach. The other thing is access. A lot of people don't realize that. Like, you can't just go shoot a documentary on the Seahawks. They're not going to allow you to. And I went to our coach and I said, hey, I'm the only person that's going to see this film, me and my camera guy. I go, so all of our secrets are safe. We don't have to sugarcoat anything. Would you allow me to shoot a week of our season? He said, yes. Sweet. So I got the money. I've hired a crew. I got the access, and off we go. And at that time, like in my brain, I'm like, I got to make this like NFL films, but I only had the budget for like 2 camera guys on a game, right? So I did the only thing that I think is sensible to do at that time. I actually mic'd myself up during a real CFL game. Like, no one knew I was mic'd. My coach didn't know I was mic'd, and I wasn't the starter, so I wasn't like in the game, but the coach would like tell me the play. I would signal it in because I was the signal guy, right? So I'd be like, right, let's signal in the play. And then as soon as the play got done, I'd walk like 3 steps to the side and be like, all right, corner out to number 83 over there. So like, I had 2 cameras. It looked like we had 30 cameras. Like, I don't know if I've ever seen like a football game doc shot like NFL films with 2 cameras. Like, the guy's breaking the huddle, he's put his gloves on, and dude, it was awesome. So sure enough, the show came out. We had a red carpet. Like, the show was a big success, and our team went on to win the Grey Cup, the championship that year, and it premiered the week of the championship game.
Oh, sweet.
And so it was like, man, I'm off. And so that's kind of how I got my start, and literally just hustling. Like, no one handed me a job. No one taught me how to shoot. I just was like, this is my internship. I'm going to learn it. I mean, my first day in Edmonton, I met my wife. And then as soon as that shoot got done, I bought a DSLR.
And a 5D?
Oh yeah. It was like it was a Nikon D90.
Okay.
Actually, it was like a Nikon D. It wasn't even full frame. And then started getting better. And then I got to the point after my 3rd year in Edmonton playing football that I was actually making more money in production than I was playing football. And I was like, coach, you know, everyone has to grow up, and it's my time to grow up. I'm going to retire and go chase this dream of doing production. And so sure enough, I walked away from the CFL and I started doing production.
This is when Jason Ryan Creative is
Jason Ryan Creative was born then. But even then, it was like in its infancy. I still didn't know how to shoot. I barely knew how to edit. And so I started doing that for a year. I was chipping away. I also took the job as a director of marketing for a large company in Canada. And I was trying to get the production thing off the ground. And I got a call one day from a guy who said, hey, there's a team in Italy looking for a quarterback. And I'm like, oh, that sounds kind of
Grazie.
Cool. Grazie. And I always wanted to go to Italy. I always wanted to travel Europe. And to that point in my life, like, football had used me. So I'm like, now how do I use football to do the things I want to do? And so I quit what I was doing. My wife quit what she was doing, and we moved to Italy and we played football. But right at that time, the Canon 5D Mark II had just come out. So for that trip, I bought myself a 5D. And I remember I had like 2 lenses. I had like a fisheye and like a 200 to 300. It was like ridiculous.
Oh, wow.
I could either shoot like extreme close-up or like massive wide angle. But when you play football in Europe at that time, it was very, basic. You practice 2-3 times a week. So literally every single day, I would just walk around for 8 hours a day shooting.
Just make stuff.
Just make stuff. And I literally, Gary Vee has a famous line of document, don't create. And I just started documenting my trip. And I started shooting every day. And they talk about that, it takes 10,000 hours to be really good at something. And that was the start of my 10,000 hours, is literally every day traveling Europe. We went to 27 countries in 2 years, shot everywhere I went. And the ironic thing is when I came back, I said, I don't need to hire a DP anymore. I can shoot. And even if I'm not the best, I can start to learn. And that's really where Jason Ryan Creative was, where I was born. Out of these 2 years I lived and played football in Europe, where I was just traveling every day, shooting every day, and starting to develop my skills.
So you get your 10,000. That's honestly crazy to me with like how good of a shooter you are now. Like to think about a time where you didn't even like know how to shoot, but you're so right. The 10,000 hours is like, how you do it.
When I first started, I literally didn't even know how to shoot. But, I will say the one thing that's cool about our industry is that like the best stuff is out there. You know what I mean? Like Hollywood movies are the very pinnacle. It's not like some tech company where they're inventing some new AI product and they're going to keep it behind closed doors. It's like, when a world-class DP shoots a film, you get to go watch Dune or Inception or whatever it is. And so I was constantly learning, and it's almost like that, it's like that Matt Damon line in Good Will Hunting when he's talking to the guy in the bar and the guy's flexing on his knowledge from Harvard. And he's like, I could have learned that for $1.50 worth of late fees at the public library. I mean, that's literally how I think about film thing. Like I have a little bit of business background, but really you teach yourself. From Chase Jarvis to other online schools, like you can learn how to light, I'm constantly studying things. And when like a new documentary comes out and like 24/7 comes out or Hard Knocks comes out, I'm watching every episode and I'm saying, oh, that's interesting. I didn't know that's a great transition, or that's great lighting, or how are they shooting interviews? And so it's like, you can see all of this stuff. And I will say the other thing I did that was like pretty unorthodox that I think, it's not like a normal thing that people do, but everyone's saying, how do I get mentors? How do I learn from people? And like, no offense, but you can't just call up the best DPs and
Steven Spielberg.
Yeah. Hey, Steven, you might ever join you for your next ET. Like it's not going to happen. But I came up with this thing and I thought it was kind of good at the time and someone else could do it. But I was like, instead of like asking mentors, I'm going to hire them. Like hire your mentors. So I was shooting it, and because I was a producer and I was controlling the budget on some of these projects, I said, listen, instead of paying myself to DP this next project, I'm just going to go hire awesome dudes that I know. And like, there's a dude out of New York that I really looked up to, Khalid Matasev. He's now shooting like big time Hollywood films. And like,
that's crazy. Actually, I didn't know that. I worked with him on Champions, I think. Yeah. They shot a scene with Russ in it.
Yeah.
He's okay, cool.
And literally I hit him up on Instagram like years ago and Facebook, and we like became friends, and I had a project, and it's like, if someone comes to you, Daniel, and they're like, hey, can I follow you around Seattle a day and see what you do? Right? Maybe not. Depends on your schedule, whatever. Right. If someone calls you up and they're saying, hey, I'm going to pay you $10,000 to come to Hawaii for 2 days and shoot something, you might say yes.
Right.
And you're also going to view that person much more like a peer, as opposed to like looking at him as like some sort of different relationship.
Yeah.
And so I did that with probably 4 or 5 top dudes. And then like, I remember like I was shooting this one commercial, and it was like supposed to be very dimly lit. And I wasn't very confident like DPing dimly lit scenes. It's hard.
Right.
And there was a bunch of like African-American actors. There was like dark skin, dark scenes. And I'm like, and there was a DP out of Kansas City, Morgan Cooper, like this guy. And I was like, dude, Coop, come out and shoot this spot for me. And then I was like looking at how he used this overhead lighting and double diffusion and like all this like different stuff. And I'm like, oh man. So to me, it was like out on my way up, I was like hiring my mentors along the way.
That's a really great tip.
And you don't see that often. And I know it's hard for like, okay, an 18-year-old kid to go hire a world-class DP, but at whatever scale you are, hire your friends, hire people you want to learn from. And that was instrumental in my own success coming up.
Well, I think to go with that, I think one of the reasons I always love hiring you is that, like, obviously we've done production at a high level, especially shooting with athletes. Like, it's always crazy. Like, the time is crazy. They're probably late. We always have like these huge ideas. Yeah. But I always like love having you on set because it's like, there's never any panic. You're always gonna like figure it out, and we're always gonna get it done. And you help me a lot, like take the stress off and be like, bro, we got this. Like, is that a muscle that you've had to like learn and develop? I feel like that's partly always who you are, but I do like love having you on set for that reason.
I think I'd love to say that playing quarterback is the ultimate training for being on set, because as a quarterback, you can't get rattled. Like the clock's running down, you're playing in front of 80,000 hostile people, and you got to make decisions. 11 guys trying to kill you. A film set's easy, like compared to that.
Right.
But I will say that, like, you know, I think where experience comes in is in those moments where you can storyboard all you want, you can plan all you want, but as we both know, when you're supposed to get 3 hours with an athlete and then they give you 30 minutes and Alaska Airlines still expects the same spot,
right?
Like, you got to go. And if you panic and you get frustrated, or you let external circumstances trip you up, like that's going to take away from what you can control. And I think for myself, when my career started to take off, when my films got better, is when I started like controlling the things I could control. And I think for me, yes, some of that athlete training was important in that. I think the other thing that has really helped with that is continuing to work on what I call like the soft skills of your mental training, like on attitude, on communication, on, you know, goal setting, on visualization. And I think the more like that you work on those sort of things, it allows you to be in stressful environments and think clearly. Like, you know, having techniques for like getting rattled, like to your point, when someone's late, like, you know, there's like some breathing techniques that I've learned over time, you know, where it's like, if you just take in like 5 deep breaths, hold them for 5 seconds, let it out for like, just that alone will like shift your mentality. And so I think, you know, for me, the biggest thing I've tried to do is approach every shoot almost like it is a game,
right?
You know,
yeah,
like you can prepare all you want, whether it's football, basketball, life, film, production, but at the end of the day, it's game time.
Yep.
And you're not going to get those hours back. And if you stress about the performance and how well it's going or not, like that's going to actually make you perform worse. Mm-hmm. What you want to do is just be in the moment, be present, be where your feet are, handle, okay, what's the next problem I got to solve? What's the next problem I got to solve? What's the next problem I got to solve? And also that allows you to still be creative. I think sometimes when situations get stressful, it's harder for them to be creative. And so the more relaxed you can be and the more, I guess, collaborative you can be in those times, the more successful you'll be. So I think, you know, you and I have had a great track record of success with these guys, whether it's, you know, Brock Purdy or Russell Wilson or whoever, is that we're able to stay relaxed in stressful situations, make them feel comfortable, know that we have a good team around us, and perform, and just know that whatever happens, it's not life or death. Right. Figure it out.
Right.
We'll go back to the film.
Yep.
We'll learn from it. And I feel like every time you and I work together, it gets smoother, it gets better. We always keep taking it to another level because we're learning from our past experience.
Yeah. And I think one thing I would like say for young directors, shooters, like that moment of like the overwhelmedness is like really fight for what you were saying, that moment of clarity, like get to that moment. Otherwise, all the noise, it gets drowned out. But when you can find that moment of clarity, then like you said, okay, this is what we have to do. This is the problem we have.
100%. Like I'd say in my top 5 movies ever, like one of them is like The Martian. And I love The Martian. That's such a good feel film if we want to start talking film stuff. But what I love about it is Matt Damon's character. I'm just a big Matt Damon guy too, I guess. But it's sort of, he says at the very end of the movie, he's talking to the young students after he gets back, and he's like, you solve one problem, you solve the next problem, you solve the next problem. And if you solve enough problems, you get to go home. And I think that's the same thing on a film set. It's like, okay, here we are. We're in a studio. We're shooting a podcast. You show up. Okay, you got bright lights outside.
Lights changing.
You know, okay, that wall's white. Okay, where do we start with? Okay, let's start with the single of the host or single of the talent or the 2-shot. Okay, get that set. Okay, what lighting do we need for that? Okay, what's our composition? That's good. Let's go to the next shot. Okay, that shot's good. Oh, but to have that shot be good, we got to change that shot. Okay, and just stay fluid because, a lot of this, it's subjective. Perfection is an ideal. It's not reality. So you just got to always, my grandpa had a saying going all the way back to the beginning to tie it together was, his motto was give it your best shot, right? And make the big time where you are. And for me, that's what it is. It's like, I'm going to approach every job. I'm going to give it everything I can and then let the results, let the scoreboard, let all that fall where it may.
Yeah, absolutely. So here on Frame by Frame, I want to try to, as much as get into stories, I also want to try to be like super practical with errors, trial and error that we've had in our careers. Let's like break down a little bit into what practically and with your business background, like how to make money as a DP.
Yeah.
And I know it's probably a lot to unpack.
Yeah.
But I think, and it's changed obviously since you started, but like to begin that conversation, like where would you just start? I want to be a T, but I also need to pay the bills and make money.
Yeah. And there's no reason that you need to be a starving artist. Like, it's not like it's this badge of honor that like I make films and I can't afford food. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like to me, like I feel like success is a byproduct and being successful as a business is a byproduct of being successful. So I would say the first way to make money is not to worry about money. It's to get good. It's like to get really, really, really dialed in with the details, like be proficient at your craft, right? I have a good friend, Colin Henderson, who's a mindset coach. And he's like, there's 3 things you can train. You can train your body, you can train your mind, you can train your craft. So first thing is like, spend the time, spend the 10,000 hours, get practice. Like, even if it's your iPhone, like get out and shoot every freaking day, man. Like, get good at what you do. So that's the first thing, because no one's going to hire you if you're not good. Right. So that was like the preface. Now, let's say you are good. Let's say you are decent. For me, the first thing I would say is you have to figure out who's going to hire you, right? If you're a DP, who is it that hires a DP, right? Is it the client directly? Is it a director? Is it a producer? Okay, if it's a director or a producer that's going to hire you, you need to know more producers. You need to know more directors. For me, as sort of this combo producer, director, editor, and my production company, when my business started to take off, is I realized, okay, there's 3 people that hire me. One, on the broadcast side at networks, it's producers, right? So ESPN, CBS, Fox, whoever, they don't have in-house high-level DPs. They have producers. Producers hire DPs and editors to do their stories, or production companies. So I need to network and meet more of those people. Secondly, it's ad agencies, right? Because it's the ad agencies that hire the big time clients that get the projects. So I actually ended up partnering with 4 different ad agencies across the country. There's one in Phoenix, there's one in Indianapolis, one in Raleigh, one in Vancouver, Canada. And none of them had the bandwidth or the client base where they were shooting projects every month, but every 2 to 3 months they had a project. And if I partner with them, they could sell that they did video. They didn't have to have me on salary, but anytime a project came in, they'd shoot. They said, "Hey, Jay, why don't you come in and knock out this commercial for me?" So 1 was networks, 2 was ad agencies, and then 3, on the commercial side, it was business owners, because it's almost like businesses that are smaller, like $1 to $5 million in revenue, they might just do it in-house, or they might just hire you directly. And so there's a number of small business owners I know that have hired me to work on things. But once you're going to get to the Alaska Airlines, Garmin, Nike, like they're going to use an ad agency. So there's a certain threshold where I see that like kind of cross over. And then, like I said, if you're more on the commercial or film side, trying to figure out who's going to hire you, if you don't know producers or you don't know directors, like maybe having an agent is a good thing.
Right.
I don't have an agent. I've never really, my world has always kind of taken me through more directly to the producers, but I have a guy I know that's exactly like me that does exactly what I do, and he hired an agent, and he now does shows and show runs, big time shows that come through his agent. So, maybe that's another option. But I would say as a DP, first of all, let's get good. Secondly, it's figure out who hires you.
Okay, perfect. Now, I would say I'm going to flip it on me a little bit. I, in the past, have had kind of like no problem figuring out who hires me, but honestly, this year has been more challenging. You know, things fall through. Being a dad, there's not as much time to put into those networks, relationships. I'm kind of at a place, and also honestly, like why I'm starting the podcast too is like, do I keep doing the same thing and hope different results, or do I pivot? Like you've been at this game a lot longer than me. You were honestly part of the reason I went and started my own thing. But have you found like maybe it was a down year? Did you go back and do the same things, or were you having to mix things up and change it and be different?
I think it's a journey, right? Like everyone's. That's literally why they call life a journey, because it is this path. And when sometimes you do come to forks in the road, and you know, I've continually shifted and evolved what I've done over time. There was a time where I was doing tons of corporate work and commercial stuff. And, you know, I actually had an office in Pioneer Square. You could almost see the building, and I had employees working for me, and I had, you know, multiple guys that were, you know, on salary that were working for me. And then eventually it felt like that work was kind of drying up, and it was becoming more of like getting hired to be just a DP or just edit. And it just sort of naturally worked itself out where, you know, some of the guys that worked for me either went off on their own freelance or found other jobs or things like that. So no, I think it's constantly an evolution. And I think, you know, even for yourself, we've talked about, you have to balance, you know, your passion with also what pays the bills.
Right.
And just because you want to be a world-class DP, there's only so many Hollywood directors. There's only so many films being made. 1 million people cannot DP ESPN shows or direct films. It's like the NFL. And so if you aren't getting those calls, or you don't have those relationships, or you don't have the time, I think there's no pride that needs to be lost in saying, hey, I'm going to shift here a little bit, or I'm going to shift here a little bit, or I'm going to start doing something on the side. And I think it's all just a balancing act, and it ebbs and flows too.
Yeah, and let's talk a little bit, because now you've done both, and I think there's two worlds of thought where like you had this production company where you built up a staff, and now you're very much more nimble. You bring on people if you need to. Guess what are the pros and cons for people? You know, I don't want to squash anyone's dreams, but also like the reality of some people do want to go start a company and staff up and do that, but then other people want to just be freelance.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd say the first thing is there are no rules. Like no one, you know, there's no one saying that you have to have an office, that you have to have a staff. And like, sometimes it is that more money, more problems. Like it really is. Like, you know, I remember when I had a few guys working for me, and it's like, okay, I got rent, I got their salaries, I got the overhead, I got equipment, you know, and then you have like accounting and taxes. And it's like, next thing you know, you have this nut that you have to hit every month just to like break even. And so I think for me, it was like, there are no rules. And I got to the place where it was like, I think I actually make more money scaling up and down just for certain projects than there's a need for me to have guys on staff. But I also know some friends that have big production companies, and that's been the route. But if you're going to do the production company thing, you got to be landing shows. Like you got to be landing big deals to pay for all that overhead. And you look at some of the companies in Seattle, like even like Screaming Flea and some of these that have done Hoarders and other things. It's like when you're getting show after season after season after season, having a production company can be quite lucrative, right? And going back to my business degree, it's like, okay, if you're gonna, you know, fixed cost versus variable cost, if you have guys on salary for X amount, the more shows you do, your costs don't go up. Your crew could just do those shows. But if the work isn't consistent, or, you know, 1 month you're bringing in a ton of money and another month you bring in zero, well, you still got to pay those guys that are working for you.
Right.
So I'd say I would definitely add layers to a production company, or add employees, like only when you absolutely need to. I wouldn't rush. What I wouldn't do is go hire 4 guys and say, now we're a production company, we're going to go take over the world. I wouldn't do that.
Yeah.
I'd say the project's got to come first. And then once the projects come, you can always staff up. Because the other thing about this business is like, with the amount of freelancers out there and the amount of talent out there, you know, it's really easy for me to shoot a commercial in Arizona and have 25 people on set, And then next week go to Europe and it's just me and I hire a local audio guy.
Right.
And now I'm not paying for an office. I'm not paying for things that I don't need to. And I'm just looking at every single project based on what is your budget for this project? What is my margin? What are the things I'm paying for as that contractor, right? Okay, these are the people I'm paying for. This is the equipment, and I know how to make those ends meet.
The generation getting into sports is getting younger, but it's also more competitive. What advice do you have for young creatives that are looking to get into the sports industry?
Yeah, I think number one, the barrier for entry is much lower, right? Because of social media, right? And
cameras are amazing.
and yeah, you don't need to go buy when I first got into it, your choice was like DSLR that was pretty average for like less than $1,000 or Alexa or Red. You know what I mean? And now there's this whole, you look at what Sony's done, Blackmagic has done, Canon, Nikon, all those. It's so much cheaper to be good. You can get an A7S and a zoom lens that you rent for a game and be pretty good to go.
Right.
You know what I mean? And so I would say for young people trying to break in, first thing, just like I said earlier, is you got to get good. And the only way you get good is to get reps. The only way to get good at shooting sports is to shoot sports. Now, luckily, there's 1 billion high school football games, high school basketball games, youth sports. Like, just shoot. You got to shoot. And then it becomes a relationship game and a portfolio game. So I think, like, if I was starting over now and I didn't have any foothold, what I would do is I would basically ask Santa Claus or my parents or get a side job and get enough money to get a very basic setup. Get yourself a mirrorless Canon or get yourself a Sony A7S or similar and start shooting sports. And then I would go to high school games or any game that I could get accredited to. I don't know if the Seahawks do it, but other people, like, you can apply and get accredited to go to games. And I own a football team in Paris. Side note,
there you go.
I fly to Paris, shoot my games. No, but you just got to shoot. And every university has students. University sports is massive. So I would say try to shoot for your college.
And some of those colleges, it's amazing the production that they do now.
It's so funny. Like years ago, when I was first getting started at ESPN, you would ask universities for film, and it was like they'd maybe give you a TV copy of a game. They wouldn't have anyone in-house. I remember I shot a story on a Florida quarterback, and like, or Tennessee, they're shooting on Alexas with students. And I'm like, what is going on? Their gear's better than mine. And so, so I'd say, first of all, get good, shoot for free, shoot anything you can. And then you just got to get your foot in the door, because at the end of the day, they're going to ask, like, let me see some of your work. Let me see your attitude and then who you are as a person. And whether it's, if some kid emailed me and was making like badass high school football films, I'll look at it.
Right.
And then I might be like, hey, why don't you come on? And then secondly, you got to intern, you got to volunteer, and you got to shoot for free. Like my first job I ever did as a football videographer, I got done playing in Europe. I wanted to DP, and I was calling, at the time, there was this thing called IFAF. It's grown now, but it's like this international federation. I said, hey, you're playing a game between USA and Canada. Is there any way I could just come and do this for free? I slept on the couch of one of the organizers. I didn't even have my own hotel room. I had to buy my own flight there. I shot for free all week. And at the end of the week, they go, hey, we got a tournament next week. We'll pay you to do that one. So like at the end of the day, I'd say you got to shoot for free. You got to get good. And then you just got to like be relentless, and you got to knock on doors. And, nowadays with Instagram, there's 80 amazing sports DPs out there.
Right.
You could DM every single one of them and say, hey, I'll come carry your gear for free. Just I'll do whatever you need. I will just work for free for you. And before long, you're going to be with the best people, and they're going to get to know you. And, they might be like, oh, I love that kid. Hey, we need a third camera. Why don't you come shoot third camera? Hey, I need an AC. Like you might have to AC. You might have to like get their gimbal settings or help them move lights, but just have a can-do attitude, and I think you'll be able to break in.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because I did want to ask you, that whole topic of working for free, I feel like can be controversial in this industry, but I just think you do have to like start somewhere. I wouldn't advise doing it all the time. No. But to your point, like you did a week for free and then you got paid a week later.
And that became like my first big client. And that client led me to a project where I met all the producers at ESPN and got me in there. So it's like, you never know like what will lead to what. And I guess my point is, yeah, you don't want to go work for free, but if no one's hiring you and you're sitting on your couch and you're never shooting, okay, what's your alternative? You have nothing to lose at that point. And, you know, a guy said this to me early on, and he said, hey, when I first got started, you know, there's three things on a project. It's either lucrative, it pays well, it's creative, or it's with great people. And he goes, when you first get started, you really only need one of those things to be true.
Right.
And then later on in your career, you need two of those to be true. And then when you get to a certain point, it's kind of got to all be true for you to want to do something. But I say for anyone getting started, it's like, just get out there, man. Just meet people. And I think there's nothing wrong with shoot. Yeah, you don't want to go shoot for free for 10 years, but you're not going to be shooting for free for 10 years if you're good.
I love that.
To me, it's like, I find so much just joy and inspiration. And like, if someone asks me like, why do you do what you do? It's because it's this endless possibilities. And it really does, you know, me being a former athlete, I truly feel like the project nature of film is kind of like sports seasons where like we talk about, you know, pre-production is like the preseason, you know, okay, what do we want this commercial? What do we want this film to be? And then you have the game, which is production. And then you have post-production, which is like the recap. And then it's over. And then you move on. And if you're going to do a project, like, you know, you're going to spend a lot of time on it, you got to be passionate about it or you'll burn out. And so, you know, for me, that's what keeps it, the evolution constantly evolving, whether I'm shooting a small thing or a huge thing, it's always a challenge.
Always a challenge. Well, bro, thank you so much. We appreciate you. I hope to work with you a lot more in 2025.
Let's get it going.
And we'll see you guys next time on Frame by Frame.